Hello, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Attlas Allux, and glad you could join us today. It looks like we might have a bit of a white balance issue, so let's see if we can fix that. Okay. Anyway, we're very red today. It's a very red tones today, and not least because of the topic that we're going to be tackling today. My own preference and is I like fall. I do like fall. I love the colors, and I like the temperatures and everything else for going out and hiking and doing things. The bugs have all gone by then, and the nothing really hot, right? I do enjoy the heat sometimes, but you know. So anyway, I wanted an earthy background today, so I couldn't decide on one. So I found this collage of fall colors, and I even am wearing fall color, as you probably guessed. And the color red, as you probably know, also relates to the root chakra, the Muladhara chakra. It is, of course, in the spectrum, it is infrared. It is the lowest, or the lowest wavelength in the spectrum of colors that we can see in the visible light spectrum. And then, of course, beyond it is infrared that we can't see. I mention all of this only as a brief overview or brief entree into the topic at hand. Because as of late, I have been encountering a great deal of talk about earthly oriented spiritual practice and earthly oriented energetic practice on a number of different levels. There's a whole spectrum of spirituality which is becoming more and more prominent as the days progress. As we approach the changes that are coming, we must understand that the two camps, if you will, the White Lodge and Black Lodge, divine nature and mechanical nature, each is drawing its acolytes to itself. The intensification of everything that's happening around us, you felt it. You have felt whether it's divine nature or mechanical nature, the higher frequency blue-violet spectrum colors of the light that's attracting you and drawing you and calling you to higher levels, and then the more earthy, more bodily, lower energetic vibrations that are not necessarily low vibrations. We don't want to give you the impression at this point that all the energies in nature are negative somehow. That's not at all. But having said that, there is a profound connection that we all have to mechanical nature and the energies and the forces of our animal psychology, of our ego psychology, which is a demonic psychology, because animals are innocent. They're mechanical, sure, but they're innocent. Mechanical human beings are far from innocent. Human beings, mechanical hominids, intellectual, rational hominids, that shouldn't truly be called human beings, are mechanical precisely because of the fact that they have defects and vices based on past errors, past mistakes. We have karma. We have egos. And their effect on us is wholly mechanical. It's reactive, and it's based in fear and lust and greed and laziness and all. I don't know. Don't have to list them. You guys know them all. And we all sense, everyone. I mean, you just have to go onto YouTube and just spend some time not watching the videos necessarily, but just scrolling through and seeing the topics being covered. Even in business and economics related channels, political related channels, conspiracy channels, of course, but also there's a whole other category of, I would say, conspiracy light, like mainstream conspiracy channels. So people like, for example, Tucker Carlson and others, Joe Rogan falls maybe into this category, and whether or not Joe Rogan is counter programming and all that stuff. I mean, again, that's a whole other question of conspiracy. But there's an entire industry of course, what they do is just churn out content. So they have to have something to talk about. It just so happens that they're all talking about some inevitable collapse that's on the horizon. And they're talking about it, and they're making videos about it, and they're having guests coming on to talk about it because the guests are writing books, and the guests are going on speaking tours, and there are programs being made, and there are individuals from all walks of life that seem to be addressing this issue. Some call it the Great Reset, some call it civilization collapse, some call it the approach of the next World War, the next Great Depression. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of different theories around what is about to unfold and happen on this earth, specifically to this humanity. And as a result, well, not as a result, as a direct connection to this phenomenon, this zeitgeist, which is not imagined. I'm not making this up. I'm certainly not deluding myself into believing that I'm witnessing all these people talking about the end of human civilization, effectively talking about the apocalypse or apocalypse light, or the precursor to the apocalypse, or the beginning of the apocalypse, or the first act of the apocalypse, or however you want to frame it. I'm not imagining this. And you've all seen it or heard it or felt it or sensed it in your circles as well. Unless you've been living under a rock. I don't watch mainstream media, so I don't know how much that the regular news channels and cable outlets and whatever are into this kind of talk. But my understanding is that's why Tucker Carlson left Fox and others have left the mainstream media, because they do want to talk about these topics. And the only way they can talk about them is on social media or on, it's getting more and more difficult to talk on YouTube, but I have a small enough following. I'm a nothing channel, right? I'm not even monetized, so YouTube leaves me alone for the most part, unless I happen to be playing a movie or something, and then instantly I get copyright struck. But that's all done mechanically, automatically. So otherwise I get left alone. But coming back to the point, this something is in the air, and directly related to that are the two forces of nature, the two natures of nature. And each one is calling its children to come home, to come back and be folded back into its warm embrace, into the warm bosom of its protection, of its love. And make no mistake that both divine nature and mechanical nature, for us, practically speaking, that means the earth, Gaia, mechanical Mother Nature, is doing everything in her power to try to make sure as many seeds, as much fruit, and as many seeds fall from the tree to rot on the ground and get reabsorbed into the earth. Now, this is, with broad strokes, an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Because every spiritual practice that relies on, or in some way leads someone to over-identification and connection with, and worship of mechanical nature, is potentially a trap. Everything within reason, within bounds, everything is a double-edged sword. Everything can be taken to the extremes. And everything has the potential to be a trap. Especially when we're talking about those activities, those practices that have been given to us by mechanical Mother Nature to assist in the development of our mortal vessel. And that calls us to, for instance, partake in the mechanical frequencies, the mechanical energies of mechanical nature. Let's not talk in vagaries. Let's just jump right in to some jump right into some examples. Let's begin with earthing. Earthing. You've heard this, you've seen this, and people talk about it all the time. How it's advantageous to go outside in your bare feet and draw energy up out of the earth through the soles of your feet and into your body. And they call this earthing. And it's supposed to help ground you and feed your root chakras and your other chakras on this energy. And it's become, I mean, it's like, I don't know what you would call it, an obsession in New Age circles and in other circles. It's this, they make this huge deal out of this sacred communion with Mother Earth, with Mother Gaia, and how earthing is essential to keep us connected to nature and connected to all things. And that the drawing up of the energy helps us to connect with all living beings and connect us with nature. And because, of course, we're achieving union with that energy. We're sharing that energy. It's like you are what you eat. If you are what you eat, well, imagine if you're drawing energy up from the earth, well, then you are becoming that energy. Does no one sort of sense intuitively the problem with this? Why this could be problematic? It just goes to show how unintuitive many in the New Age and many so-called spiritual, and the more earth-oriented they are in their spirituality, the more primal and earthy they are. You find more and more that they have this belief, this understanding, this philosophy, this theology, this religion, that it is through nature that they can reach the divine and that they can ascend into the higher dimensions. They can achieve their 5D ascension through their communion with nature. And for many, this includes the use of psychedelics. But even if they don't use psychedelics, there's lots of different practices that they do. And there's breathing exercises that can send people into states of ecstasy. And there's, of course, various different, well, I guess that falls into breathing exercises, yoga, and then there's obviously Black Tantra practices, so tantric practices. But even if we stay away from those, there are teas that people can drink, and then of course just going out in nature and communing in nature. And then of course there's smoking pot, which you wouldn't call pot a psychedelic drug by any means. It's just, but that's something that has become more and more prevalent, obviously, since it became legal in many jurisdictions in North America. And then there's, what do they call it? Burning Man. And there are many spiritual retreat centers that are eco-centric, these eco villages. And they're designed, and they're not cheap. We're not talking about like, huts in the jungle here or something like that. The one that I saw in Guatemala on Lake Atitlan was $500 a night, US. And that was how many years ago? Maybe 10 years ago now. And it was, of course, made to look very earthy. It had all the right materials, and it had the right setting. But of course, it had also the luxury that people with money demand. But they want that feeling like they're communing with nature, and that they're being spiritual, and they're bonding with nature, and they want to go and meditate in this beautiful, lavish eco resort in which they're getting, gourmet meals and fine dining and fine wine and whatever else their heart desires. And then they can go into the villages and to experience the nightlife on the shores of Atitlan. They can go where they can do ayahuasca or they can do other things. And there's this whole eco, nature, spirituality thing happening where it's this pseudo-spiritual, ecological tourist business industry that is really just an elaborate excuse for people to go and party and entertain themselves as they are feeling themselves bonding with nature and becoming more spiritual and having a spiritual retreat. This is nothing new. This sort of thing has been happening for millennia. This is, after all, the oldest trick in the book. It is the oldest and easiest and most effective methodology that the Black Lodge has, that mechanical nature has, to turn the spiritually oriented away from the higher chakra orientation, from the orientation to the White Lodge, to the orientation away from divine nature, towards an orientation to the lower chakras, to the earth, to mechanical nature. So why is it more pronounced now? Well, it's always more pronounced during the end of a civilization, during a civilization's collapse. So there was the Olympic opening ceremony, and at the opening ceremony of in Paris, they had that controversy because they had what they staged to appear. They staged it in a way that it would look like Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. But when they were called on it, they said, no. It was, of course, a Dionysian festival from ancient Greece that was related not only to Greek theater, but also to the first Olympics. And the festival to Dionysus was indeed a festival to the god of wine, the god of revelry. It's basically the god of partying. But at that time, wine was a relatively new discovery. And the Greeks didn't age their wine. They didn't have to. They would basically crush the grapes with their feet, and in very short order, because they were using their feet especially, the grapes would start to ferment. In Hungarian, it's called most. I don't know what it's called in English, but it's essentially grape juice that's left in the open air, or while the grape juice is fermenting. It's not yet wine, but it's like, we would call it kombucha, really. That's what we we essentially call it kombucha. It's just the fruit going bad, right? It's the rotting fruit, but it starts to produce alcohol. And for someone that has zero try to imagine a humanity that had never, ever, ever experienced alcohol ever. Not only as individuals, but genetically. You know that if you have no tolerance for alcohol, like I don't drink, so I can't even have the most I can have is something like a shandy or a radler that's 2.5%. So I mix a beer with something to get it to 2.5%, or I buy it. Or nowadays, I just buy non-alcoholic beer if I want to have something, or a non-alcoholic wine, so I can have wine and toast at a special occasion. I don't drink it, under normal circumstances, but it's a social thing, and you don't want to toast with I don't know, soda water when everybody's having a glass of wine. So it's also a treat, but besides, it tastes good, right? It just doesn't have the sting of the alcohol, which I don't like anyway. Alcohol is poison. But I'm just saying I have no tolerance for it. If you give me a glass of wine, if I have a sip of that wine, it hits me like I was drinking 40 proof liquor. Okay? And I have drank in this lifetime. So my body on some level still has a capacity to metabolize alcohol, because I grew up drinking. Even as a kid, my dad would always give me a little bit of his beer, or when we had special occasions, because being Hungarian, it was a social thing, it was a cultural thing. Even if the kids were at the table, if we were toasting Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving or whatever it was, somebody's birthday, everybody at the table had to partake in the cultural thing of toasting with wine. So we got like this much wine, or maybe we got it like mixed with water or something, so it was a little bit diluted. But so my body is not entirely foreign to metabolizing alcohol. But imagine if for thousands of years your culture and the genetics, your organism, and had never had to metabolize alcohol before. This is what wine was to the Greeks. It was like 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours fermented grape juice. That's it. That's all it took. And it was strong enough and powerful enough, with even like 0.5% of alcohol, or like maybe 1%. I don't know how strong it got, but in 48, 72 hours, it's not that strong. Even if you're making kombucha, it takes quite a while for it to start, really fermenting. So for however long, I know the Dionysian festival lasted at least a week. I'm a little bit fuzzy on the. I studied this back in university, because I studied theater, and you have to study the Dionysian festival and the origins of Greek theater. So if I'm not mistaken, it was at least a week and possibly a month-long festival during the harvest. And so even if it was a week is a long enough time to get something fermenting in enough capacity that if you've never had alcohol before, you can get drunk on it. Or it'll affect you. You will have a psychotropic effect in the brain. But if it was a month, well, then after a month, you can actually get something that's pretty strong. So, but it was a harvest festival celebration, and it was Dionysus was the god who oversaw the revelry and the fun, the partying, that universal human compulsion to overdo it. And let's face it, we overdo it with food. We overdo it with alcohol. We overdo it with all manner of substances. We overdo it with just about anything. The indulgence, overindulgence. And just take a moment and take stock of yourself, your family, growing up, the culture, whatever culture you're a part of, and recognize that overindulgence, 90%, 99% of overindulgence comes from nature. And that which doesn't come directly from nature, things like technology, social media, the internet, Netflix, so on and so forth, all of that is entirely mechanical. There are very few genuinely true spiritual practices that you can overindulge, that you can take to the extreme. There are, people do it. I was guilty of this years ago when I got a little bit obsessive about things like meditation and morning pranayama and some other practices. But even then, I would get booted out of meditation. So even then, meditation is something that if you're doing it properly, you can't do it too much because your being will kick you out, will give you the boot. If you've ever tried to overdo it, if you've ever tried to force meditation that you weren't ready for, you will see yourself getting kicked out. Now, sometimes it's, an ego kicking you out, a demon kicking you out. If you have one, a powerful enough one to do that, which I do. So it's not altogether always, but the point is that your being will not allow you to really meditate too much. Because if you do try it, you'll burn yourself out. But it's interesting how when it comes to the things that humanity is really known to overindulge in, have you noticed that you can't burn yourself out? Try burning yourself out eating ice cream and junk food and potato chips and whatever. Try burn yourself out smoking or drinking alcohol. You can destroy yourself. Absolutely, you can destroy yourself. But you never get to a point where it's like you hit physical limits. But there are no metaphysical stops when it comes to indulgence. And that's a clue. That's a clue that something's not good for you. Because when something is good for you, you can't have too much of it. It's like try overeating steak. I mean, you can eat a big steak. I mean, they sell porterhouse steaks. I don't know if you've ever had a porterhouse steak. I'm 6'3", north of 200 pounds. I can't finish a porterhouse steak. Or at least, I mean, I have to be like really, really hungry or something and not have anything else on the table, like no bread or anything else with it for sure. And certainly not drink like a big drink or anything along with it. But oh my goodness, the times that like I've had, business clients and so on, treat me to meal or whatever, and someone says, "Oh, you have to try this, you have to try that." So then someone plopped down a porterhouse steak in front of me, and I'm just looking at the thing going, how the hell am I going to eat this? And sure enough, it's like, you can't do it. You cannot overeat protein. Your body won't let you. Your body will tell you, nope, that's it. You've had enough. We can't deal with it. We can't process it. We don't want any more. We don't need any more, because protein takes so much energy to digest and to extract the energy out of. It's like your body will say, whoa, 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 whoa. No, no, no. But ice cream, I could sit and eat 4 liters of more. And again, the only reason why, and if you eat it slow enough, you can just keep eating it. And your body is like, yay. Why? Because it's sugar and fat. And it knows right away how to shuffle that off and store it in the body. So it doesn't care. You can keep eating it and eating it and eating it and eating it. And there are no signals telling you to stop eating. We cannot underestimate, and we cannot assume that nature, mechanical nature, is altogether altruistic in its intentions when it comes to us, when it comes to humanity. On the contrary, the evidence is overwhelming. There is so much in nature that is slowly, cleverly, subtly trying to kill us. I mean, just the poisonous things, even. But then there's the subtle poisons, which are obviously, they're not exactly toxic, and yet there are many, many, many plants and vegetables that we eat, for example, that are toxic, that have toxic compounds in them, that definitely can, if you overeat them, if you overindulge in them, you can develop serious illness because of the toxins in them. Now, mechanical nature is not overtly trying to kill us in that sense, but at the same time, those toxins are in those plants, in those vegetables, in those fruit. Well, fruit's a different story, but in vegetables, the toxins are there to discourage animals from eating them. And it's strange, don't you think, that a plant, and when I say a plant or whatever, I mean mechanical nature, would create vegetables that are so bright colors and aromas and everything, that are so enticing and alluring, but then be filled with toxic compounds, discouraging animals from eating them. It's worthwhile meditating on why nature does that. What's nature after? What's its purpose in that scenario? As we've talked about in the past, there's a very real and easy way to comprehend the Tao. Stanza and substance. If you want to bear it down to light and dark, sure, good and evil, okay. But the nature of the darkness is to take and absorb light. Mechanical nature applies and shares energy as an investment, and it expects a return. So mechanical nature is willing to allow a soul, a being, to borrow a body for a lifetime. Now, mechanical nature knows that sooner or later it's going to get that body back. But mechanical nature, its nature is to absorb and hoard and collect light. So what's it really after? What's it really looking for? Why does it lend you that physical body, this vehicle, this vessel, for you to use and abuse all the days of your life? You're eventually going to lose it. Mechanical nature is going to take it back. But mechanical nature is counting on you becoming identified and attached to it. And not only to it, but to all the other wonderful enticements that you can do with that body. All the other ways that you can ingratiate your body and your senses, and all the ways in which you can indulge every conceivable pleasure and experience all this wonderful earthiness. Why? Because mechanical nature, by lending you this body, when it takes it back, it hopes that your soul is going to stay in it. It's that simple. That's its game. That's what it is in the business of. That is its nature. Because a machine cannot exist without energy. And the energy, everything is energy. There's no matter. This notion that we're extracting energy from matter is a misnomer. It's just, we're just transforming energy from one form to another. But the subtle energies, the higher energies, specifically the creative force, the creative energy, the energy of God, mechanical nature can only get that a number of different ways. One of the ways in which a planet receives that energy, of course, is the sun, the solar light. And we don't necessarily want to get into all the metaphysical science of all of this, but this is the context, the true context, in which we have to understand the machinations of mechanical nature, and how mechanical nature is not here to entertain you for your sake or to gratify you for your sake or to give you all of these touchy-feely sensory phenomenal experiences for your sake. Hollywood is not churning out all those junk garbage movies for your sake. And all the content creators on YouTube, not all, but many content creators are just churning out content because their channel has been monetized. And once your channel is monetized, if you can keep churning out the views, you keep the money rolling in. If you can keep their attention, if you can get them to pay attention, if you are mechanical nature, you want all the souls here to be completely obsessed with and identified and attached to all that you give them. You want them to keep coming back. You want to get them addicted to pleasure, or addicted to pain, if that's the case, but addicted to the 3D sensory experience. Or for those who are spiritually inclined, well, now you have a whole other level of experience to be able to give them. And that's your pseudo-spiritual pagan nature idolatry. And all of the trips to the lunar astral plane on psychedelics. Because they take you to hell. That's where they take you. Mechanical nature cannot awaken your consciousness. It's not in the business of awakening consciousness. It's in the business of enslaving consciousness and stealing energy. That's its nature. Mechanical nature can't and won't violate its programming. Even the Terminator in Terminator 2, when Arnold Schwarzenegger played the good guy, he was the hero. He had been reprogrammed by John Connor in the future. He didn't spontaneously change allegiance. No machine can spontaneously grow a conscience. A machine is hardwired to do what it does, and mechanical nature is the same. It absorbs light. It enslaves consciousness. That's what it does. So having an orientation that is geared towards nature is good. It's good. It's fine. As long as you remember your higher self, your divine mother, the cosmo creators, the monads of the trees and the plants and the animals and the rocks that you're interacting with. And recognize that they're in kindergarten, those monads, those souls, those beings are in kindergarten. They're on the long road of transmigration of souls as the monad evolves from the mineral, the plant, the animal, and then finally into the human kingdom. Never lose sight of any of this. Maintain your connection to the higher levels, your higher self, your true self. who has no identification and no attachment to nature. But there's great beauty in nature, there's great wonder in nature, because the cosmo creators ultimately designed and built nature. But the underlying mechanics, the mechanicity of nature, the adversary, the Black Lodge, soullessness, selfishness, that is a mechanical, soulless program. And we must comprehend that. We must remain cognizant of that at all times, lest we fall into the mistake of becoming obsessed with practices like earthing. So what is the practice of earthing? Because you will note monks, Buddhist monks, but holy men, spiritual people all over the world throughout all time have walked barefoot. And they eschew footwear of any kind. Or if they have sandals, it's like the thinnest leather or straw or hemp or whatever sandals that they wear. What's that all about if they're not earthing? Because what the New Age teaches is a black magic degeneration of what earthing actually is, and that's grounding. You see, because we have ego, we have fear, anxiety, and negativity of all kinds, stress, and just the natural accumulation of all this negatively charged energy throughout the day. And of course, in our modern world, we have so many unnatural fibers, so many like plastics and nylons, and that these accumulate a great deal of static electricity. But then there's also the same thing is happening psychologically with stress, anxiety, and all these other things that are just accumulating. Grounding is just as it sounds, like you would ground some home electronics with a copper wire to release the buildup of static electricity. And even the word static electricity communicates what it implies, right? It's static. Okay, it's stagnant energy. It's energy that's just pooling and accumulating in different areas and centers. And believe it or not, that's the energy that mechanical nature wants. That's the energy that it thrives on. Negativity. It makes sense because they're lower vibrational energies, right? And why egos make us suffer, because mechanical nature lives on suffering. It feeds on blood. It feeds on negatively charged energy. That's why the egos are what they are, and they all cause suffering, and they all make us to act in ways where we take positive energy and we convert it, we polarize it negatively as it goes down and out. So if we have accumulated bundles of energy in our various centers, we can release that by grounding it, and we make nature very happy by doing that. So the practice of walking around barefoot or grounding yourself regularly, or you can do this with pranayama. You can actually concentrate and using your willpower when you're moving your chi, you can actually release down through the balls of your feet, but also through the ends of your hair follicles, if you have long hair or a long beard, because the hair is an extension of the nervous system. And you can direct and channel negative energy down into the earth You don't, because prana is not electricity. You have to ground yourself for static electricity. You have to physically ground yourself, but you don't have to physically contact the earth for prana. Prana is, it's not like electricity. It doesn't follow the same rules as electricity. So you can send prana down into the earth through the ends of your hair follicles. It just so happens that the longer the hair, the more effective it is. This is what earthing really is. You can actually do breathing exercises where you are absorbing positive solar light and solar atoms and releasing negative lunar atoms, lunar energies. And you can make this a part of your pranayama, where you can absorb, and you can use your conscious willpower to do so. Just absorb it from the space around you and send it up your spinal column to the crown chakra. And then when you release the breath, you can release, pardon me, and release the negative energy. And you can release it down through your feet, and like that, just send it back down into the earth. This is easier to do if you are in a building or in a basement that's directly on the ground. This is difficult to do if you're in a high rise. High rise buildings are not a good idea in general. I mean, there is something to be said for being close to the earth, and it's this grounding aspect. You're not drawing energy up out of the earth. I'm not recommending anybody do that. Or if you do that, you have to do that in a process of transmutation. This is what we do when we do pranayama. You're recycling and transmuting and rotating that energy and moving that energy around within you so it doesn't become stagnant and static. But you have to do that consciously. And what most people on the internet talk about earthing, they're saying, oh, you just draw up the energy and it revitalizes you and it energizes you and you can use this energy for all these great things. And no, we have, if you want to boost your energy from nature, then the energy that you need is solar energy. We are solar beings. Our true selves, our being is solar. Our false self and mortal vessel and egos, they are lunar. Lunar being mechanical, solar being conscious, divine, spiritual. The modern world takes great pride and pleasure making fun of all of these ancients who so-called worship the sun and the sun worshippers, not realizing, not understanding the absolute ignorance of their scorn and their intellectualism, not understanding that the ancients didn't worship the ball of gas millions of kilometers away in space. They were worshiping the solar light. They were worshiping the Christ. In other words, no different. But yeah, somewhat different, because at the same time, the modern Christians worship Jesus, the man. And they look with scorn and judgment anybody who worshiped the sun, Ra, the sun god, and they say, oh, look at those pagan unbelievers, those heretics. They were so simple-minded and they were worshiping the sun god, or Thor. the god of lightning. Not understanding, not realizing that both lightning and the sun represent that same fire, the Christic fire. The fire of fires and the light of lights, because all energy is Christic in origin. And it's that Christic light, that energy that descends from on high, from the All-Father, from the Absolute, that comes down and condenses and creates those lower vibrational frequencies, and eventually even that which we perceive as matter, that mechanical nature, mechanicity, the machine of the universe must steal for itself if it's to persist, because that's what a machine does. We have a backlog of comments here, so let's get to some of these. Jennifer says, the rocks, crystals, plants, and animals are our younger brothers and sisters, like you mentioned. Kindergarten, however, I have spent years grounding my bare feet in the earth, and I can tell you from experience that enriched my life and health. I released energy that had no purpose in my body, not take energy from Gaia. Yes, exactly. And Jennifer continues, recently I have not been grounding, and I can attest that there is a big difference in my well-being. Yes, exactly. And herein lies the remember that selflessness, the light shines. Your true nature, your beingness, is to serve, is to give, is to shine, is to express. It's not to take. This is why temperance and moderation is the order of the day to anybody who's genuinely spiritual. And why identification and attachment and hoarding is antithetical to the spiritual practice. Well, if that's true, then how is being a vampire sucking energy up from the ground through your feet, how does being an energy vampire mesh with being selfless and giving and radiant? The New Agers don't ask this question. Or if you ask them the question, if you put their feet to the fire, if you put them to the test, they immediately respond with cleverness, with artifice. And they will reply, oh, but nature is abundant, and I'm partaking in the abundance, and Mother Nature wants us to partake in her abundance because she's giving and she's all loving and she's this and she's that. Yeah, well, she's a good banker. And like any mafia loan shark, she's going to come collect. She wants her interest. And 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, the energy that she gives you, that she offers you, what she offers you is a trap. It's a way for that she gets more energy out of you than she put into you. It's called return on investment. Where do you think that comes from? Business and return on investment. Obviously, there's a light side version of that as well. Return on investment is something that exists in both White Lodge and Black Lodge. It's just that the investment and the return is very different in the White Lodge than it is in the Black Lodge. Kundalini King says, about to go sunbathe. Well, there you go. That's a good plan. But if you do go sunbathing, consciously sunbathe, consciously absorb the light, and don't forget to do your breathing. And so don't just unconsciously, mechanically go out and roast yourself in the sun, because your body will mechanically absorb a lot of sunlight, and too much of that sunlight will burn your skin and will have other detrimental effects, because that solar light is problematic for mechanical nature to absorb. That's why it takes a special facility, a special capacity in mechanical nature to absorb and transmute solar light. It's called chlorophyll. And the chloroplasts in plants and algae and photosynthetic bacteria and other photosynthetic organisms. Mechanical nature cannot absorb solar light directly. And the Earth, this planet, cannot absorb solar light directly. It has to be digested, transmuted, transformed into those lower frequency vibrations that the Earth can ultimately absorb, that mechanical nature can absorb. It can't absorb the solar. So that's why if you go out in the sun and are consciously praying or meditating and breathing and absorbing that light, you won't get a sunburn. There are limits to this. There are limits to everything, right? So you can't overdo this, but you won't be allowed to, because you'll do this practice for so long, and then you'll just get a notification, a very strong intuition, or you get booted out of whatever you're doing and say, okay, now that's it. You've had enough, right? Because you can't handle more, because the solar light, the Christic force, is the most powerful force in the universe. There are many, many so-called sun worshippers out there. And by that, I mean the people who just like lying in the sun and tanning. And what they do is they will coach their bodies and their skin they will condition, that's the right word, they will condition themselves, their physical organism, to develop more melatonin and to become more efficient and more active in its application of melatonin to protect itself from the sun. And so they will work on these deep, deep, deep tans. And it's like, for them, as sun worshippers, it's their hobby, or they just love the look of that bronzed skin. Now, some of them go to tanning salons, and I'm not going to get into the nonsense about that, artificially stimulating your skin cells to produce melatonin with ultraviolet rays that have been created by a machine. Like, you see, you can't get solar light from a tanning bed, right? It's an ultraviolet spectrum, but it's not the Christic light, right? So you can get tanned, but hey, yeah, it also causes cancer if you use those things. I mean, it's been documented fact now that especially young people, teenagers and such, they should not be going into tanning beds, because it disrupts the endocrine system, the hormonal system. All kinds of things are being disrupted, of course, because puberty and the teenage years, that's when the sexual organs and the endocrine systems related to all the hormonal balances and the pineal gland and everything related to sexual reproduction is undergoing development. And all of that is related to Kundalini, which is the feminine aspect of the Christic force. latent and dormant within us in the Muladhara chakra. And so if you're going to be applying artificial ultraviolet light, artificial crystic light to your body, when your body is attempting to extract from the genuine crystal light, the genuine crystic light, and transmute and synthesize and crystallize the feminine aspect, the feminine atoms of Kundalini, which is the creative force, which is our sexual force. It's the force that we can, as mortals, here as half gods, half men, right? Half beast, centaurs. We can utilize that in our activity, and we can also transmute it. But if in your formative developing years you're bombarding your system with artificial crystic light, well then, it's but it's not equally, but it's also not a good idea for young people and teenagers, although they very often do this or they used to. I don't know how much of a fad it is anymore, but it used to be very fashionable and trendy for the popular girls and the popular guys to have bronzed, tan, toned, muscular bodies, right? And so they would go and they would lie in the sun for hours, but they wouldn't do it consciously. They would do it mechanically. And again, they would be conditioning their body to develop more melatonin, and they were absorbing all of this sunlight to do that. But they were not truly absorbing crystic light, but the crystic light was there. So, like anyone that overindulges in any of the elements, but particularly fire, if you overindulge in fire, invariably the egos will want to corrupt and exploit that fire. And we've talked about this, for example, when you eat a lot of red meat or pork, then you're setting yourself up to have a nocturnal pollution or a wet dream, in other words, because the succubi or incubi or succubi will come in the middle of the night to come in and get that energy, to get that fire, because they want that fire. And there's a lot of fire in, for example, red meat. It's one of the reasons why you can't overindulge and eat too much of it. But if you eat a lot of red meat in one particular day, like a big steak or whatever, then it's important to do your pranayama and your prayers before you go to bed, and to smudge your room and make sure that your sheets are clean, that you don't have a lot of dirty sheets, a lot of accumulated astral larvae, because mechanical nature is not only in the physical world around you, it's in the metaphysical world. There are parasites called astral larvae, and they feed on our energy. Kundalini King says, good stuff, great topic. And Jennifer says, I learned in my meditation to take in the solar energy and release the lunar, just like you said. At first, I did not know that, and years ago, my intent was to bring Gaia's energy up into me. Folks are ignorant, sadly, as I was. It's we all start somewhere. We all start somewhere. And invariably, on the path to gnosis, there's only one place to start, and that's ignorance. I was ignorant for decades about many, 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 many things. I still am. I'm a terrible Gnostic. I've said that how many times? I'm a lousy Gnostic. I'm a terrible esotericist. Really, I am. Honestly. In terms of studying esotericism and studying the past and studying what others have said about that. I'm really not a good Gnostic. But then I'm not here to be a Gnostic. I don't mention the term often anymore. What I am and what I've always been, first and foremost, is a mystic. And if there is a philosophy that I adhere to, it is the one championed by Hermes Trismegistus, the also known as the Atlantean god Thoth the Atlantean. And I don't just mean the Hermetic principles, because of course those are a part of it. But you see, I never studied the Hermetic principles. I didn't have to. The Hermetic principles revealed themselves to me through nature. But it was never a case of me identifying and becoming attached to the vehicle of expression, the medium, in other words. I always connected with the essence, the truth, the principle itself that was embodied in nature. So, for instance, as above, so below, as within, so without. This is the book of Thoth, and we've talked about this many, many times, and I've said I sound like a broken record. The living, breathing word of God is writ large and small, all around us and within us, if we but have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. This is a principle or a philosophy, or it's a truth which is embodied in the Hermetic principles that have been written down from the Emerald tablets. But in fact, they are derived, they are extracted from the experience of the universe itself, including nature. But it's the essence that matters, not the messenger. You know that expression, shoot the messenger? Well, Hermes is Mercury. And Mercury is the messenger of the gods. And to the Norse, he's Ratatoskr, the squirrel who runs up and down Yggdrasil, the tree of life, the great, and delivers messages from the Allfather down to the earth and back again. That's Mercury, and that's Hermes, a messenger of the gods. Well, God is all around us and within us. God is speaking to us always, all the time. The principles are embedded in essence in everything. Everything can be our teacher. Look, last week, I used the Pink Panther series and detective novels, detective stories as an example. Like the Pink Panther, Peter Sellers. And analogies and allegories are all around us. And they are here below as they are above. But of course, not in their literal existence, but in their essence, in their archetypal existence from the world of Absolute. I came to this reality, to this realization as a mystic. I was able to apply words to it to have a linguistic context with which to share them with others, including yourselves, through esoteric study. But once I acquired a certain foundation, a certain lexicon of esoteric language and a basis and a foundation, I stopped studying esotericism because I'm not here to memorize and master and regurgitate what others have said. No, not even Master Samael Boyor, although I will quote him often. But I also quote Carl Jung. I'll also quote Jordan Peterson. I'll quote movies, right? I'll quote Master Yoda from Star Wars. I'll quote anybody anywhere who said anything that was true. At the same time, I'm not attached or identified or attached, certainly not to any religion, no matter how profound and beautiful and sacred and spiritual, and it doesn't matter. They are forms, they are expressions in nature. And they all come under the influence of entropy and death. And we can see that. You've witnessed that. Even Christianity is experiencing that. So there comes a time when things have to be put down into a new form. Things need to be reborn. Things need to be renewed. And this is especially true on the level of mechanical nature. Mechanical nature is recycling all the time. Birth, death, and sacrifice, the three factors of Aum. Kundalini King says the gods are all aspects of nature and the human psyche. Again, there are two natures to nature. So yes, absolutely. But then there's mechanical nature, right? And mechanical nature has its own hierarchies. It has its own gods. We call them demons. They don't think of themselves as demons. They see the White Lodge as being demonic. In fact, you will see this rhetoric online, people talking about the soul enslavement grift and the great reincarnation grift. And you will hear Christians and others talking about it as it's some kind of a trap, some kind of prison that your soul has to escape from. So worship Mother Nature, worship Gaia, or worship Jesus, or whoever they want you to worship. They will tell you that they're saving you from the great reincarnation trap, the great soul trap of reincarnation, of endless lives lived over and over and over again. Anyway, so it's so just remember that when you make statements like this, there's two natures of nature, and you got to be specific. Kundalini King says, "Will do. I do it naked, 5 minutes tops. Soul on the pole." Thank you, Kundalini King. I think that comment speaks for itself. Benjamin Ochoa says, I think they call it taxonomy in the Bible, the primordial stages of money, business, and industry. Yeah, I think you're right about that. You know what came into my mind was taxidermy, but taxidermy is not that. Taxidermy is something very different. And Kundalini King says, my Kundalini activated while I was meditating and sun gazing. That was in 2020. And he also says, Odin Vile Ve. Odin Vile. Odin Vile Ve. I'm trying to. No, my Latin is not. Oh, okay. I thought you said something in Latin here, but no, it's not that. Okay, it's the brothers of Odin. Benjamin says, "LOL." Okay. All right. Well, we're caught up on comments. This brings us to talking a little bit more about being grounded and now there is something to be said for being in it but not of it. So I'm just going to shift gears away from any kind of I got the important stuff, right? Because the pendulum is for this humanity, the pendulum is swung too far in the indulgence in the mechanical, physical nature side. So I kind of respond to that by, wanting to swing the pendulum back. But we don't want to swing the pendulum back too far. We want the golden middle. We want the middle way, the razor's edge. Which means when you're in nature, obviously, you don't look contemptuously at nature. You don't look at those cayenne peppers that you like to dry and crush on your pizza or put in your soup or whatever. You don't look at that and go, "Oh, that's toxic cayenne pepper sauce. It's trying to kill me." Like you don't develop this very wrong view that lay people have of gnosis and Gnostics, because they will hear a lay person or a new ager tuning in, listening to me speak for the first, how long has it been? 90 minutes of today's talk. And they'll say, "Oh, you see, Gnostics hate nature. Gnostics hate nature. And they talk about demiurge, the spirit of nature, and blah, blah, blah. And that's an evil God creator and this and that and the other thing." Okay. So they misunderstand and they misinterpret because they don't understand that they are way too deep in it and of it, that the pendulum is swung so far to one side that we have to speak in honest, straightforward, and stern ways about recovering that energy, right? And to get the pendulum just to go back to center. But you want the pendulum back in the center. And I love nature. I go out for at least an hour every single day, walking in the woods and forest bathing and looking at animals. And I absolutely am obsessed. No, that's not the right word, but I love animals. I love animals. And I love all creatures, all living things, frankly. And doesn't matter. Like, I have a very tough time with mosquitoes and stuff, simply because I feel terrible every time I swat one. Flies, I catch and release. I try not to. I don't want to kill anything if I can help it. Right? Mosquitoes, though, are. I just have this knee-jerk reaction to slapping myself when I'm feeling because they're I'm so sensitive that their anesthetic tends not to work on me. Sometimes it does, and I don't feel myself getting bit, but usually I feel myself getting bit, and I kind of like, like it's like a reflex action to slap the thing or scratch, like right away where I feel I'm getting bit. And then mosquitoes are like, they crumple, right? Like they just like they're nothing. They have no. They're very, very delicate, so they die very easily, and I feel bad about it. I do. So I mean, I love nature. I love living things, and I believe I've told you the story of working with Wolfgang on a landscaping project, an outdoor ecosystem. And when we were doing these 2-man boulders and we set them all up in a line, and it was like we were communing with the souls of those stones, and we had given them this new meaning and purpose in their life, and they were all standing up straight like soldiers, and you could tell it, you could feel it, you could sense it. These 2-man boulders were sitting on this pallet, on this skid, wrapped in plastic for who knows how many years, on the back lot of this landscape supply company. And then we came and we gave them this new meaning and purpose. And they were beaming with pride. They were just beaming with just a new sense of self-actualization, a new sense of purpose. The homunculi of those stones were just, they were reveling in this new work, in this new existence. Because I don't care who you are or what you are, being tossed ad hoc, willy-nilly, every which way onto a pallet and wrapped in plastic is no way to be for any being. No, not even a stone. Right? So even rocks, even the homunculi of the mineral kingdom. That's why when people make those little standing stones, the balancing ones, they do that. A lot of people do this balancing thing. They think that they're balancing, and that's what they're doing. The stones are locking and holding hands with one another. You cannot physically balance things like that. The things participate in the balancing. Like if you take plastic bits of trash and stuff and try to balance it that way, you'll have a hell of a time. You can't. But stones, they lock. Stones lock. Stones can hold hands. They can lock elbows with each other. Obviously, they don't have physical elbows, but that's not. They don't need to have them. That's not the way the mineral kingdom works. It's on a denser level, and it operates with different mechanics. It's the same way as plants. Plants move. Plants fight. Plants have fights all the time. If you watch plants on, but you need stop motion photography because you can't perceive how plants are getting into fights. And plants are getting into fights. Like they're tangling and they're going at it. It's amazing. You can watch these on YouTube, by the way. I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. So the wonder and beauty and communing with nature is important. And being in nature is good for us. It's good for us on multiple different levels. I encourage you to do it. And when you are in nature, be present and aware in nature. Pay attention and use focused concentration. Make your walks in nature a meditation. When you encounter an animal, you can have a conversation with it. Now, it's not going to be a conversation like you have with a person. And animal communication is a skill and a power that one really does need to work on to develop. If you have a pet, you discover that you develop a kind of telepathy with your pet, especially if you're the one that raised it from a very young age, that telepathy with a pet is easier, but that's because of it's your familiar. That's why they used to call that a familiar, and that why magicians very often had a familiar of some kind. And because we can learn a lot from especially a cat. If you have a black cat, especially, then they're the most magical of creatures, and they can help you a lot. That's one of the reasons why they were revered by the Egyptians, because cats are. There's a great quote from the documentary Kedi. Kedi is the Turkish word for cat, and the documentary is about the street cats of Constantinople. And the quote from the movie is, it is said, according to Sufi lore, Sufi tradition, that cats are aware of God. You see, dogs are different. Dogs think man is God, but cats just know better. And that's why a cat will never, ever treat you the same way as a dog. Because as the Sufi Imam was suggesting, that dog worships you. That dog, you are God to that dog. But cats are aware of God. And if cats are aware of God, they're not identified and they're not attached to you. My mom used to say, it's a Hungarian expression, dogs bond with owners, cats bond with households. Meaning a favorite person to a cat is the one who's petting it right here, right now in the moment, or feeding it right here, right now in this moment. It's like cats live moment to moment. That's how they exist. A cat will abandon an owner, a family, like this, like that, to go off, seek its fame and fortune, do whatever. It'll go to find a new home owner, a new owner, or whatever. And then maybe it'll get bored, and then maybe it'll come home. It'll come back again and say, yeah, I went on a trip, but yeah, now I've come home, come back, you know. So there's so much fascinating and beautiful and wonderful experiences, and there is there's so much knowledge to be extracted from the book of Thoth, the book of life. That's God speaking to us through his creation, through nature. And for me anyway, I have never been enamored with the earthiness of nature. So for me, I do yard work, I do gardening, I do, I have worked with my hands and so on and so forth, but I don't have the same kind of visceral acumen. Acumen, is that the right word? Acumen is not the right word. But like to get my hands down in the dirt and into the mud and into the soil and into the muck. Like people who take mud baths. Like, is a mud bath supposed to be exfoliating? Is it energy? Is it like, what is it? I'm not entirely sure what a mud bath is supposed to do. I know that an Epsom salt bath calms you down and calms the nerves because of the magnesium. Okay, so and you absorb the magnesium from the Epsom salt. Is it a similar thing with a mud bath, that you're absorbing minerals from the mud in through your skin, and that those minerals like revitalize your skin? Somebody will have to explain this to me. But the idea of immersing myself in mud is not appealing. I don't have this earthy thing, right? I have no desire to smoke marijuana ever. I have no desire for like the really like down and primal and earthy like going and roughing it. I love going out in nature, but I'm not altogether about, like dressing in like akin to a caveman or whatever, and like roughing it, and like, I've talked about in the past how I don't have tattoos or piercings or anything else. None of that appeals to me, because it's a kind of primal, earthy, bodily identification thing that I just don't have. Now, is it entirely justified, or am I saying that people are wrong if they take mud baths or if they have tattoos or whatever? It all depends on, are you deeply identified? Are you in it and of it? Are you in it but not of it? This is the key. So in terms of being in the root chakra and being in it, one of the things that I have to practice, and I've had to work a lot on, is being comfortable in my own skin. Now, I have, well, before we go on this track, let's get to some of these. Let's go back to Godfather says, "Greetings, Attila. It's Richie from Mississauga. Hello, Richie. Nice to see you." For everyone else, I know Richie offline. He's been a long-time friend of the family for years, so it's nice to have you here. Kundalini King says, I love my cayenne peppers, I assume. I grew them myself. Great for the blood." And he also says, "New Agers are pseudo-initiated. They aren't truly initiated." Of course, yeah, exactly. Godfather says, "Hey." And Kundalini King says, "Straw." And he also says, "I make rings with iron. I make rings with iron ore here out in the national forest. And in the spring and fall, wife and I do nudes forest bathing hikes. It's wonderful." Kundalini King says, "Wife and I are hitting the woods now. Love you, brother. Thank you for all the inspiration." And Godfather says, "Hello, greetings. Hello, this is Richie from Minnesota." So, Richie, I see your chats, and I hear your chats, and I respond to them, but I can't allow for the break in the flow, so I get to them in chunks, like most YouTubers do, right? It's you can't stop what you're doing in the middle of what you're doing because someone said hello. It just can't be done. Not in this context. So, but hi, it was nice to have you here. And Tiffany says, "Hi everyone. Jumping in late, but noticed we're talking about cats." Nice. I think Tiffany has an affinity for the felines. So being comfortable in your own skin, being in your body, it's important. It's important. And it's the root chakra that gets you there. If you breathe and breathe into your pelvic area, breathe into your pelvic floor, like taking a deep, this is why yogic breathing into your solar plexus, breathing into your chest will like tighten everything up and like keep you up in your head. But if you breathe down into your solar plexus, in other words, into your belly, breathe so your belly expands, and breathe all the way down so the air goes all the way down and like fills your pelvic area. And if you are an anxious person or a flighty person, like a hectic person, always being pulled in every direction, difficult with focus, difficult with you're always up in your head, you're always thinking, you can't stop thinking or worrying, or right, if you're up here all the time, this doesn't mean that you're in heaven, right? Because you're up in the crown chakra, right? It just means that those higher intensity, higher vibrations, and it could be that you have lots of egos messing with you, there. And you're unable to ground. So remember earlier we were talking about like the buildup of static electricity? Well, the buildup of negative static energy, static psychic energy, and that static psychic energy feeds ego. So now the egos are all up in your head and keeping you up in your head, and you're worrying and you can't, like you wake up in the middle of the night. You've seen these memes, they're on Facebook all the time now. I see them all the time on Facebook. These memes where people say 3 a.m. Mine's the type of mind that at 3 a.m. wakes up and decides to tell you how they think you need to rewire the circuit breakers in your house, or whatever. Like there's all kinds of memes online where people are talking about how they get woken up in the middle of the night and their mind won't shut up and let them sleep. Well, okay, if you're like that, it means that there's a lot of energy and a lot of negative energy that's like pent up in your head. So there's lots of ways to work that energy out of your system through physical means, through mechanical means, and through your physical body, and breathing and being present and feeling yourself filling out your body on the in-breath, and actually feel that prana like filling out your body and not letting it all just accumulate and pool and keep rising up into your head. Now, in my case, because with the epilepsy and the entity that I live with, it occupies, right, parts of my body. And it's like, it's always been hard for me to master my body and be present in my body because I have a house guest who's not keen on sharing, if that's the right expression. So it's like you've got a house guest that you don't get along with, so you got to hide out in your end of the house, and they hide out in their wing of the house, and never the twain shall meet, right? It's something like that. But I recognized that no, it's my house, or at least it's supposed to be, at least temporarily. It's like I rented a house from someone, but then they didn't tell me that there was a squatter there. So, and I got to be living with the squatter now. So that's why being in my body was always difficult. But I always kept at it. And a number of times like at one time in my life, I did cycling. And I'm so over cycling now. It's the mechanicity and everything of it. Like it's not, it wasn't giving me what I needed from my exercise. And so, but hiking and being in the woods and being able to feel on a bicycle, I wasn't feeling my body in the right way. I was disconnected. I was on a machine, but that machine was disconnected from the nature that I was trying to experience while I was working my body, while I was exercising. So cycling didn't help me get deeper into my body. It like more disconnected me from it. It's a strange feeling. It's a strange feeling. I enjoy riding a bicycle, don't get me wrong, but not as an avid cyclist. Just, I had to give that part up. I sold my road bike. I sold my mountain bike. The technical mountain biking stuff I never enjoyed anyway, because it was just, again, if you're not in your body, if you don't have that capacity to fill out and be in your body, and you have something that gives you seizures of all things, doing frantic, hectic, at times life threatening technical mountain biking and stuff is not a good idea, right? Right? You have to recognize that stress, when we exercise, we want to control the stress. When we do things in nature, right? That's why I could never rock climb, or like I could never climb the side of a cliff face or whatever. It's all about comfort zones to a degree. Now you want to push your comfort zones. It's not about comfort and security. When you exercise, you don't want to be comfortable when you exercise, because you're not really exercising then. But you also don't want to be overdoing it, because exercise is one of those things that people overdo. And I admit that there are times when I've pushed the limits and I've gone too far, like as many people do, because again, I don't have that same capacity of knowing the limits of my physical body, because again, because of the disconnect that I've had with it for so many years, because of a unruly house guest that doesn't allow me to be fully present in my body all the time. So as a result, the intensity that I have, that I do with everything, can get a little bit much with the physical exercise. So I've overdone that in the past, and I'm dealing with a shoulder injury, but I've overdone other things as well that have been very mechanical and much more heady, right? Like the video games, right? Playing Diablo. Now, Diablo is ridiculously addictive to begin with, and it's addictive for most people. So there's nothing unique about that. But getting repetitive strain injuries and neither is getting repetitive strain injuries from using the mouse and keyboard playing Diablo for hours at a time, right? Again, so when I speak of overindulgence and overdoing it, rest assured that I'm not pointing fingers and laying blame. I'm speaking from myself, from my own experience, how I know how easily it is. And again, like eating ice cream or, whatever, I'm not pointing fingers and saying, oh, look at obese people, look how they're indulging and overdoing it. No. I myself have overdone it, right? My self-medication with sugar and fat via ice cream. Ice cream is probably, it's safe to say ice cream is like my crack cocaine, right? That and Doritos, and there's a few other, and sour cream and onion flavor. Sour cream and onion flavoring, I think it's like milk powder and garlic powder and onion powder and dried chives and MSG, and and salt, and that's basically it. But that stuff, I think it's the MSG in it, but all the modified milk ingredients, like the dried milk powder and buttermilk powder and whatever that's in that stuff, that overstimulates the nervous system in the brain. I think that feeds the demon. I think that's why I've always been obsessed with that flavor since I was a kid. But potato chip flavors in general. But yeah, the more MSG in them, the better. I think that because MSG is, it gives me seizures, right? It causes me to have seizures, so I know it's feeding the demon. So that's one of the things that, one of my drugs, right? One of the things that I'm addicted to, and I'm addicted to it, like all drugs, like all people who are addicted, like all alcoholics, it's the demon that makes them drink. They're self-medicating, right? Like all the comfort food, all the carbs, right? What they call comfort food, right? Macaroni and cheese and all that stuff. So when you hear me speak ever about, the phenomenon of overindulging or, being too mechanical or falling into mechanical nature or being too, like, there are all sorts of ways that mechanical nature will get us. And like I said, the digital revolution is one, but getting obsessed with mountain climbing or rock climbing or, or whatever the case may be, just overindulging, doing too much, right? And you can have too much of a good thing is never a good thing. These are cliches for a reason. Bread is another one. Do you remember that scene from Gladiator when it was the I don't know, whatever, how many number 40th, 50th, 80th day of the games? I can't remember, but I think it was right before Maximus fights Tigress of Gaul. They show the slaves with the carts filled with bread, and there's these big, huge, crusty, like nowadays we look at them like Italian or Portuguese calabrese, like loaves, that thick, crusty, crunchy white bread. And they're just hurling these loaves of bread into the stands of the Colosseum. And this is where the expression bread in circuses comes from. because the Circus Maximus and the Colosseum, and they would throw bread to the crowds, and you can just imagine being a Roman there, and you're just tearing off chunks of this crusty and probably quite salty, I imagine, like seasoned, salty, and crunchy, but carbolicious bread. I mean, I'm just right. Even right now, I mean, bread for me, it was like my poor mother. It was her also a drug of her choice as well, like bread. And we used to like dip it in like goose fat or duck fat whenever we roasted a goose or a duck. My mom and I, one of us, would buy like one of these like crusty baguettes or like fresh Portuguese or Italian bread. And then later on, when everybody else was like opening presents or doing whatever, or everybody's like settled down for the night, we'd sneak into the kitchen and we'd be dipping this white bread in the duck fat or the goose fat, the drippings in the bottom of the pan. And so it's like, and if we didn't have that, just a really, really, really good butter, a really good salted butter on crusty bread. I mean, so you can imagine this is like the equivalent of like Doritos for Romans sitting in the stands of the Circus Maximus or the Colosseum, right? And it was carbs. It was like just like it is today. Like potato chips are just carbs while there's starch, right? And Doritos and so on. So I'm no angel, right? I'm right down here in the thick of it in hell like everybody else. And I know that everything is addictive. Everything is designed to be indulgent and to be overindulged. Everything that mechanical nature gives us is that way. I mean, you can get addicted to like the smells of things. I know people who are more or less addicted to essential oils. And you go into their house and it's like wham, it's like you're getting hit in the face by 1,000 different scents, right? It's like, oh my God, am I in like one of these like an incense store or something? Everything is potentially addictive. You can overdo everything, and you can become identified and attached to every sensation and every experience. And yeah, mechanical nature is a master at this. Because, as I said, it's betting, it's in making an investment, and it wants a return on investment. It wants your soul. Jennifer says, I love that same flavor. Ever since I was little, sour cream and onion flavor. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy, isn't it? But I'm also like a bit of a dairy. Like I think there's something about it it's the dairiness of it. I think. I'm pretty sure because with Doritos, it's there's this flavor called zesty cheese. For me in Doritos, it's the cheesy ones, and then there was Cool Ranch. Actually, occasionally in Doritos, they have something called Sonic Sour Cream, which is like it's like a kind of sour cream and onion mixed with ranch, but on a Dorito. It's like I'm so lucky that that's like only occasionally available because that's crazy. Benjamin Ochoa says, "Oh, Gladiator 2 is in the works. Looks quality like the first should be good." I'm not keen on Gladiator 2. I don't think Gladiator needs a sequel. And if it's anything like the new Alien Romulus movie, I'll pass. Thanks. For me, Gladiator is scripture. I have an article, actually several articles. I was supposed to write several articles on Gladiator. I could write a book about that movie because it's scripture. For me, it's sacred. It doesn't need a sequel. But I'll keep an open mind. I mean, if it's good, it's good. I don't have high expectations for it though. Mugaboo 22 says the ancients viewed parasites as demons, and parasites strive off of carbs and sugars. Yeah, so this is the thing now. Anything that indulges or triggers the pleasure centers in the brain and are going to be sending those shivers of excitement, those shivers of pleasure through the body, that's negatively charging energy and ions. And sugar, it just so happens, as Mugaboo is saying here, now what do you do when you want to ferment something, right? If you want to create alcohol, what do? You load it up with sugar. And the bacteria that produce alcohol are feeding on that sugar. But so does yeast. If you want to bake, if you want to make bread, you can't make bread without sugar. You can't, because the yeast has to eat something. And yeast, again, yeast is a fungus. Bacteria, fungi, all parasites, like as Mugaboo says here, they strive on carbs and sugar. And because they're breaking stuff down, and I think it's because under normal circumstances, right, yeast and molds and so on, they metabolize sugar and carbs, and they extract the energy, but they produce the byproduct alcohol. So they create sugar alcohols as a byproduct, and other toxins or so on. And the same thing is happening metaphysically, because the carbs, the carbon is, because that's really what carbohydrates are, is it's carbon and water. That's why it's called carbohydrate. That's the basis of life. And it's natural that one of the byproducts of the breaking down of the basis of life is alcohol, which is a toxin, which is a poison. Because parasites are there. Well, when you say parasites, we shouldn't put yeast and mold in the same ballpark as parasites. They can be parasitic. Like if you get fungus on your foot or so on, it's obviously like a kind of parasite. It becomes parasitic, but it's not necessarily a parasite. Like the real parasites are the ones who keep you alive, but they keep feeding you. They keep feeding off of you, but it's just south of a symbiotic relationship. Like if you think about it, a tapeworm could develop a symbiotic relationship with its host, but it doesn't. It keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing incessantly, slowly starving its host to death. It can take years, actually, and tapeworms can grow to like a ridiculous length. That's a parasite. You know, mosquitoes, bloodsuckers, so on. Like there's parasites of all different kinds. But then there's like the real hardcore, like, again, almost like a symbiont. But the difference between a symbiont and a parasite is a symbiont seeks mutual harmonious symbiosis. So it's not detrimental to the host. In fact, it's something beneficial that the host gets from it. So those would be the probiotics in your gut, right? There's an entire ecosystem in our digestive system. And we have a mutually beneficial, mutual harmonious symbiotic relationship with the probiotics, the bacteria in our gut, our gut flora and fauna, because we also have floral bacteria. So they're not the kind of bacteria that's generally speaking creating a lot of sugar alcohols. But even those kinds of bacteria that do, they are actually beneficial bacteria. That's why we that's why we eat fermented foods and drink things like kombucha, because there is some alcohol in kombucha. least if you make it at home. I don't like boiling my kombucha. I'll live with the small trace amounts of alcohol. I don't like, because there's no, like trying to evaporate the alcohol off of your kombucha, you kill most of the bacteria in the process. So I know there's ways of doing it. You know what? It's just a little, I would much rather have a tiny trace amount of alcohol than do more processing of the homemade kombucha. But anyway, but no, I have heard this, that yeast in the body is that it's one of the most detrimental things that you can have in the body is a lot of yeast, a lot of fungus, and fungus thrives on carbohydrates because, again, they're the recyclers of nature, right? Like molds and everything else, they're recycling nature, and so they're breaking down carbohydrate, and we're mostly carbohydrate and protein, but we don't need to be. Protein doesn't need to be broken down in us because we use it up fairly quickly, and the body will eat its own protein. So there's no reason to so muscles atrophy on their own. There's no reason for nature to have something come along to break down muscle. So I don't know of many. There are flesh-eating diseases. There are flesh-eating parasites. I don't know. Are there muscle-eating parasites? I'm not sure about that one. But yes, that's absolutely true. And ask any baker. You can't bake bread without sugar, because, I mean, if you want leavened bread, because the yeast won't rise without sugar. Tiffany says, is there a healthy level of excitement or enjoyment of stuff while we're here? I ponder my enjoyments often and haven't come up with an answer. Yeah, the healthy level is not being attached to it, not identifying with it. That's the healthy level, where you have an experience, and as pleasurable or wonderful or exuberant or ecstatic that it makes you, you're like, okay, been there, done that. Now it's water under the bridge. I can move on. It's when you have such an experience and you're like, oh, let's do that again immediately, or very soon after, or you find yourself thinking about the experience and wanting it again, and you start craving the experience. When the excitement or exuberance or enjoyment becomes a craving that you then indulge, and then indulge again and again and again, and then eventually overindulge, and then it becomes a habit or a full-blown addiction. And there are many, 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 many things that don't fall into the category of, I don't know, excitement, I guess. I'm trying to think of myself in video games. When I say video games, I mean computer games. I have owned consoles in the past, but I'm not a real console type player. I was, and I played all kinds of games, but a lot of them, I really enjoyed RPGs, role-playing games, and I mentioned Diablo a lot. And Ultima, but Ultima and Diablo were very different games, but except for Ultima 8 Pagan. But when I think about Diablo and the point and click, you're pointing and clicking with a mouse. And it's like, but it's insidious. The sound effects, the way the game feels, that you get these little itty bitty little bites of satisfaction. You can't call it excitement. You can barely call it, I don't know what but it's pleasurable. It's pleasurable, but it's tiny little morsels of pleasure. But it's repetitive and it's immediate. Okay, if you can't relate to Diablo, I imagine everybody on the planet has played Candy Crush Saga. Anybody who has a smartphone or have played some kind of one of these free to play smartphone games. If you play with the sound on, it's the sound that hits you, that grabs you. In Japan, they have something called pachinko. Pachinko, they have pachinko parlors. It's the equivalent, it's the Japanese equivalent of slot machines. It's slot machines mixed with pinball, but the balls fall vertically, like the ball bearings fall vertically down, but it's the noises, the sounds that these things make. They've been engineered by sound engineers and psychologists, like neuropsychologists who study like brain patterns and stuff. The sounds are completely addictive. And if you play those video games, especially those mobile games, any game that's so-called free, it's not free. They're sucking your life. They're sucking your life. Remember that. These free-to-play games, they are a life suck. They're vampires. They're vampires. They're going to get your money eventually too, but first, they're going to get you. They're going to hook you, and once they've got you hooked, and the free-to-play games, the way they get you is they feed out little itty-bitty little bits of pleasure. It's like how you would coax a wild animal to come closer and closer and closer and to win its trust. You throw it a little piece of bread and then another one and another one and another one. And then every little like crumb of bread that you throw that squirrel or like a sunflower seed or a peanut, you're tossing to the squirrel, you're throwing it so it's a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And each time the squirrel, it's getting its reward, but it has to come a little bit closer, a little bit closer. So it's getting over its fear. It's getting over its natural leeriness and suspicion of this human. So you're winning it over one peanut at a time, one peanut at a time, one peanut at a time. And eventually you get him hooked and he's climbing, he's going right into the bag of peanuts. Then you pull the drawstring on the peanut bag and congratulations, you've now caught yourself a squirrel. Well, the free cell phone game companies, well, that's what they're doing. And so their pay to win model, their monetization model is the same. They're not looking to get you to, drop $60 on a AAA game that you buy and then go home and install and play. No, they'll get you to buy like little gem packs for 99 cents. They'll throw a little thing. Oh, here, this will make your, you want to continue your game? Or you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to skip this level, or you want to do this, you want this power up. That's called pay to win. Here, it's only 50 cents, or it's 99 cents, or it's never a dollar value. They make you use in-game currency, 100 gems, right? It's going to cost you 75 gems to buy this power up, right? So you go into the store, and you say, but you can't buy 75 gems because the gems, they sell in packs of 50, 100, 200, 500. But you go to the store and everything is these weird denominations that they don't multiply into the gem pack. So you're always buying more gems than the cost of the value of what you're getting. There's always a little discrepancy. And it's in that discrepancy that they're siphoning the little thing. So the same way in that they're metering out these little bits of pleasure, they're also collecting, but little bits, little crumbs at a time. But Candy Crush Saga is on what? 100 million cell phones? 100 million cell phones siphoning a few dollars per person per week. It's like several $100 million a week. So you see, Tiffany, yeah, there's excitement and enjoyment and everything else. So there's the big splash things that we are aware of. But remember, mechanical nature, this is its nature. It has had millions of years of trial and error to test what works. It knows what works. It knows it knows how to create the most addictive substances on the planet and put it in everything. It's called white sugar. It's the most addictive substance on the planet, and it's in everything. It's more addictive than heroin. It's more addictive than cocaine. How do we know that? Because if heroin was more addictive than sugar, heroin would be in everything. Rest assured, this is mechanical nature. It's not going to take its most powerful creation, its most powerful addictive drug, and bury it in the back of the store or make it illegal. No way. It's going to put it in everything. Next time you go to the store, look at the labels. If 99% of what's in there has sugar in it, and the stuff that doesn't have sugar in it has a sugar substitute that in many cases is even worse than sugar. I'm thinking about aspartame and sucralose. These are more addictive than sugar. People who are addicted to diet sodas. You know people like that. It was a big thing in the 80s. How much? Because how people were getting addicted to Diet Coke and everything else. Because the same opiate effect that's happening in the hypothalamus of the brain, it's the same areas lighting up as when people do heroin. But the difference is you get the hit with sugar without all the downside. So it's like you can get a little bit of sugar, that little hit, and they can put a little bit of sugar in everything, and that's how the Black Lodge gets you, right? Not all at once, like the big heroin addiction, the big alcohol addiction, right? Alcoholism, because but sugar addiction gets you a different way. And then you wake up one day in your 50s and 60s, you have type 2 diabetes. You say, how the hell did that happen? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because you eat a lot of packaged food and there's sugar in everything, and you eat a lot of carbs, right? And then boom, type 2 diabetes. So this is just mechanical nature. It's what it does. It's what it does, right? It's making an investment. It's giving you what you want. And it'll give you a modicum of what you need to survive. Yeah, it'll give you that too. But it's really interested in giving you what you want, or making you want what it has to give you. That's another way to look at it, right? It's sales. It's marketing. It's branding. It's all of these things. It's food science. It's mouthfeel. It's taste. It's flavor. It's color. It's texture. Why do you think all that exists in the food industry? Why is fruit just like perfected the way it is? Oh yeah, but of course, the food scientists, the Black Lodge, mechanical nature knows is saying, hey, these food scientists, they can make it bigger and plumper and juicier, so it's more attractive where? In the store, right? And it pisses mechanical nature off a bit. Mother Nature gets pissed off a bit because you know what? The natural stuff, the real stuff out in the wilderness, wild blueberries are the most incredible things you've ever eaten in your life. They're absolute garbage compared to the genetically modified, genetically modified grown agriculture blueberries are garbage compared to what you find out in the wild. Right? That's why bears are completely addicted to blueberries. Who wouldn't be? Wild blueberries, they're phenomenal. And wild fruit of every kind. They might be smaller, and they're like full of holes, right? Because of the, worms or whatever. Like they got spots on their apples, and the apples are small. They're not these huge mammoth things. They're, but the flavor, the taste of wild natural fruit is 10 times better than that agricultural garbage. Why? Because Mother Nature, mechanical nature, right? It doesn't have to sell fruit on its appearance. It sells fruit on its sugar content, on its flavor, on its, right? That's what keeps the animals coming back. And that's what got humans addicted to fruit in the first place. But this is mechanical nature's modus operandi to get us hooked and keep us trapped. This is why I say, like, any kind of spiritual practice that's based in nature is a potential trap. We have to understand that this is not nature hating. This is just calling a spade and understanding that nature has two natures, and worshiping and welcoming and admiring the beauty and the wonder and the incredible creativity in the design and the essence of nature and the monads, the spirit of nature, the love and the genius and everything in behind it. It's just when we overdo it, it's when it becomes an obsession, an identification, an attachment, a habit, an addiction, a trap, and ultimately the kind of trap that becomes very hard for us to climb out of. Tiffany continues here, and she says, RuneScape was my bag for a while. I still haven't deleted it from my computer, even though I haven't played in years. I never played Candy Crush. Well, don't. I mean, you know what? Download it on your phone just maybe to see it and see what I'm talking about. And maybe look up a video on YouTube of a Pachinko machine, like playing Pachinko. But to understand what I mean by Pachinko noises, Pachinko sounds. But if you played Diablo, you know what I'm talking about, because Diablo, its sound design is what is, but the design of these things, its look and feel, the experience, there's something about it that just makes it addictive, right? Benjamin says, I'm increasingly concerned that humanity is becoming more mechanical in thought and action. Christianity teaches that while we are made of earth, we possess a divine spirit from God. However, I fear we're losing that divine aspect, especially as materialistic thinking dominates. I feel this is my own life, and without the teachings of the Bible, resisting this mechanical nature would be challenging. Even knowledge seems mechanical. What are your thoughts? Thanks for reiterating earlier that. And yeah, Benjamin, you can't write too long a comment here. You got to break them up into separate comments. But that's about, you see, the max. I don't know if you have the rest of it on your computer, but thoughts on knowledge becoming mechanical. Well, if it's in the intellect and it's rational knowledge, then yes, it's mechanical. This video that I'm working on, I'm probably going to have to put a disclaimer at the beginning. Oh yes, and it was just a couple more words. Thanks for reiterating earlier that nature is mechanical. Yeah. And Tiffany says, I played Pachinko, and you are correct. The sound is divine. Yeah, you see? Yeah, okay. So there you go. So you don't have to play Candy Crush, Coming back to Benjamin's comment here, knowledge being mechanical. Okay. So knowledge is never mechanical. Knowledge is conscious. Knowledge is true. Knowledge is alive. It's essential. And knowledge that is essential can express as an infinite number of ways. That's what truth is. That's what knowledge is. And knowing that exists in consciousness. Okay? What you think you know, what people call knowledge, book learning, that is mechanical because it's fixed. It's fixed and it's subjective, it's mediated. And it's mediated by the lower faculty of rational mind. It's intellectual. And it doesn't have to be factual, right? You've heard the expression, my truth. Well, if everybody has my truth, well, then what does that tell you? That there is no truth? That's, according to postmodernists, that's exactly what they believe and that's exactly what they teach, that there is no truth. And to mechanical nature, there is no truth but my truth, because its entire existence is subjective. Now think about this for a moment. What two machines are the same? Can a clock know what time it is? Of course not. Can a clock show what time it is? Yeah. But can it know what time it is? No. But it has its truth, and its truth is absolute. The gears in a clock, you can't mess with those gears. Once the clock is made, it's there. The only thing that can happen to that clock is entropy. It can rust, it can break down, it can break. In other words, the law of entropy can happen to that clock. But the clock cannot reevaluate what it's doing, nor can it change how it tells time. Its gearing is its gearing, its gears. Even a computer has to be reprogrammed to change. So to change someone's mind, to change someone's thinking, they have to be reprogrammed, or they have to be reconditioned from a higher faculty or reconditioned by others, which is why everything is brainwashing and propaganda these days. Benjamin says what the other Benjamin Raphael says is talking about sounds close to what Kundalini King said earlier, that New Agers are pseudo awake, or they're awakening negatively. But yes, absolutely. Because even Gnostics, there are lots and lots of self-styled Gnostics who are not awakening. They study the books of Master Samael. They might even do the practices that Master Samael teaches. But many of them are just mechanical, intellectual theologians, really. They study Gnosis and they practice Gnosis mechanically. They know all the books, they know all the quotes, they know all the practices. Some of them can read ancient Hebrew and they can read runes and they can do all these things, right? And some of them can even, they learn to project in the astral plane and they develop powers. But do they know their innermost being? I mean, do they know their innermost being? When they speak, do they speak the words of their being? Or are they identified and attached to being a Gnostic? And are they attached and identified to some organization of Gnostics and Gnosis? I recently left a comment on a post of Jordan Peterson's, because he's talking about his upcoming book, We Who Wrestle with God. And I said, okay, fine. But a true human being doesn't wrestle with God. If you wrestle with your conscience, that means you're identified with the demon. You're identified with the false self. You're identified with and as your shaitan if you wrestle with your conscience. I've very rarely in life truly wrestled with my conscience, but I've wrestled a hell of a lot with my demons and my demon especially. I wrestle with my demon, meaning for me, conscience was the default. I very rarely went against my conscience. I have, but that's when the demon was winning. I wasn't wrestling with my conscience. I was wrestling with a demon that was trying to wrestle me away from my conscience. I've never wrestled with God. Never. I don't wrestle with God. So to write a book, We Who Wrestle with God, that's because Jordan Peterson wrestles with God. He's a rational intellect. And yeah, he wrestles with God. You want to get to a point where you are wrestling with your demons. You're wrestling with yourself, your false self. And you side yourself on the side of your conscience, on the side of God, as a servant, as a vessel for your conscience and all that your conscience and consciousness has to bring into the world and do in the world. Now, on the surface, you might say, well, that's all fine and dandy. That sounds like a lot like the argument like the glass is half empty or half full. Practically speaking, the glass has the same amount of water in it. If you call it half empty or half full, right? That's what a pragmatist says. That's what a clever rationalist would say. But we all know there is a huge difference approaching life as a glass is half empty type of person or a glass is half full type of person. And then there's a drop of water in the glass, and you look at the glass and say, oh, look, the glass is a tiny bit full. Because the more spiritual you are, the higher potential you have within you, the deeper into hell you must go. That's the law of the Aum of life. That's a law. There's the balance and the dance between stanza and substance must be there. And the integration of substance by stanza must be there. The reconciliation must be there via the third way, what Gurdjieff called the fourth way. Because, of course, Gurdjieff had to really overcomplicate everything. Benjamin says, there's two huge cakes. One's the real thing. The other is a pseudo cake, and humanity quarreling like talking a bite from the real cake and the other from the pseudo cake. I had a realization we need to be humble. Acknowledged people like to bicker and fight over these two huge cake ideas and just chat about them when someone is taking a bite from these two cakes. He said, I thought the cake analogy was good. You know, there's a lot of cakes. And there are a lot of pseudo cakes. And there are a lot of cakes that have been tampered with. The thing is that even pseudo cakes have some cakiness to them. Why must I, as the one who comes at last, why must I take a page from the Book of Thoth, from Hermes Trismegistus? And why must I teach that scripture is all around us? That you can find truth in every cake, even pseudo cake. Just never take any cake at face value. Let the world show you what true cake is. And allow your knowledge of the essence of cake to grow inside of you by your experience of cake, pseudo cake, tampered cake, moldy cake, rotten cake, frozen cake, wedding cake, birthday cake, ice cream cake, cupcake, right? I can go on and on and on and on, but there's cakiness to everything, right? It's the essence of cake that matters. There is no such thing as real cake and fake cake. No cake is perfect. There is no perfect cake. They're all perfect in their own way because they all, in their own way, are some kind of reflection of cakiness, of the essence of cake, of the archetype of cake. The multi-layered, sweet, icing relationship, right? This is in The Last Samurai with Katsuruga looking for the perfect cherry blossom. He says you can spend your entire life looking for the perfect cherry blossom. And then in his moment of enlightenment at the end of the film, he looks up. They're all perfect. They're all perfect. Because at that moment, he finally sees past the surface. He sees past the aesthetics. He sees past the pleasure and the sensations. And he feels and sees with his third eye, and he feels with his consciousness into the essence of cherry blossom. That is the Book of Thoth. There is no book that can tell anybody what the archetype of anything is. You have to know it, you have to experience it, you have to see it at work for yourself, but you can see it everywhere. And once you do, then you know. Why? Because you can see it everywhere, and it doesn't matter what the outer expression of it is. You see past the surface into the essence. This is knowing, but the rational mind can't do this. Only the conscious mind can do that. Because pattern recognition is an aspect of the rational mind. You can teach a rational mind to recognize patterns, but the conditioning of an AI mind to get it to recognize patterns, or to get it to, it still doesn't, it will never comprehend the underlying pattern. It will only ever understand by virtue of conditioning and comparing. So it will have had to see millions upon millions of expressions of that pattern but it's the consciousness that can extrapolate and see the essence of the pattern by seeing it once. And then from that moment on, it sees it everywhere. Benjamin Ochoa says, exactly. Both cakes have a cakiness to them. Very true. You never want to take any cake as at face value, though. No cake is perfect. Benjamin says, as people age, their heads naturally incline towards the earth, perhaps reflecting their impending return to it. Similarly, the widespread use of cell phones has many of us constantly looking down, further disconnecting us from the world above. Yeah, and that's not to mention that the cell phone is completely mechanical. The smartphone is. And it's also a very insular world. It's a world that's in our head. It's a virtual world, which is, there's two types of, remember, nature is divide and conquer. So it doesn't matter if nature gets you through the mechanicity of technology or the mechanicity of machines. Like there are the gearheads, right? The gearheads, the petrol heads. You know, the guys with a million tools in their garage or in their workshop or whatever, or like there are the people like collecting stamps or collecting antiques or collecting toys and other collectibles. Like there's a million different ways. It doesn't matter how mechanicity expresses itself. It could be the mechanicity of nature, like in that level of nature, or it could be the mechanicity of technology. It could be the mechanicity of anything. It's the enticement, the fact that all these things, there is an alluring and addictive nature to them. See, meditation is not addictive. Meditation is not if you're doing it right. If you're doing it in a mechanical way, if you're doing it in a way where you're pleasure seeking and you're meditating for the sake of experiences and you're becoming identified and attached to spiritual experiences, and that's the only reason why you meditate, is because you're hunting spiritual experience, or you're hunting accolades, or you're hunting for powers, or you're hunting for, then you're grooming yourself along the path of mystic pride to become a black magician. You're awakening negatively because you're feeding desire. You're feeding a desire to be spiritual. I have no desire to be spiritual. I don't even know what that means. I mean, I know what it means, but for me, it's an oxymoron, because spirituality is the absence of desire. I know longing, and I draw a very distinct line between longing and desire. It's distinct, but it's, for many people, it's a subtle, arbitrary distinction. But it's very, very strong and powerful distinction between the two. Because longing to do what one came to do in this life is not a desire, unless you make it a desire, because a longing can become a desire. And a desire can become something that seems like a longing, but it's actually a yearning, a pining, right? There are other words to describe these long-standing, drawn-out desires that are felt over years, decades, these festering desires. Whereas a longing is just like a hope. Longing is closer to a hope than it is a desire. And hope is, yeah, it's a longing. It's not, hope comes from above. Hope comes from the soul. What you hope for is like what you pray for. Now, you can pray for a Ferrari that you desire, sure, but that's not the purpose of prayer, and you know it. And most people deep down in their hearts know it too. So, but when your child is in the hospital, you hope they're going to recover, and you pray to God for the recovery of your child. He's too young to die. Now that's a fairly standard, common, and it's not too much to ask that your young child lives, right? You long for the life of your child. You long for what's best for your child. You want them to live a long and happy life and a fruitful life. It's not a desire, though, because it's not selfish. It's not a selfish, well, I mean, sure, maybe a cynical person can argue that the parent just desires their child to live because they don't want to be deprived of their life with their child. Anyway, let's not get into the weeds on that. But you know as well as I do that there's a difference between longing and desire. Longing is for the sake of others, really. Longing to serve, right? A desire to serve is an oxymoron. All right. Without getting into all of the details and all the weeds on all the different, earthly things, crystals and all this other stuff, crystals and dream catchers and totems and potions and teas and incense and garlic and Chinese medicine and acupuncture and Reiki and it just goes on and 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 on. Right? I don't partake in most of this stuff. And the reason why I don't is because of the reason that you now have, the context, the comprehension, the understanding that there is a time and there is a place where even Reiki or, when you use incense to smudge a room to keep negative entities out of it, yeah, okay, that's good. Right? It's valuable, it's useful because mechanical nature does offer substances and strategies and whatever to protect against other negative entities. So there's lots of value to be had in there. And of course, if you want to build a temple, you're going to build it out of wood or stone. And those are elements of mechanical nature. Like, there's a dance between it. So again, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's the recognition that worshiping Mother Nature and worshiping Gaia and relying on all of these mechanical entities as the cornerstone of the nucleus of your spirituality is shackling you to the material world, the physical world, and the lower dimensions and the lower vibrations of mechanical nature itself. And I gave you the context that I did so that when you understand why the New Age is a multi hundreds of billions of dollars industry, and like from the ecotourism to the New Age this to the New Age coaching to the crystals and the baubles and the potions and the talismans and the it goes on and on and on, and the books and the CDs, oh yeah, and the sound frequency CDs, and just goes on and on and on and on and on, and good it goes. And there is benefit to some of it, right? But when you put it in the context that Everything that's like pleasurable and enjoyable and whatever, it's made that way for a reason. And that reason is not to give you pleasure. Pornographers do not make pornography to pleasure you. They make pornography because they want something from you. Your pleasure is the means by which they get what they want. That is the Black Lodge. That is mechanical nature. That is substance. You are always on the short end of the stick. Unless you remain aware, conscious, and partake, but to the golden mean, to the golden middle. In it, but not of it. Here to experience, here to enjoy, here to know, but not to become attached, not to become identified, not to become ensnared and enslaved and shackled to that which ultimately has its own heartless, soulless, selfish, mechanical programming to fulfill. And that programming does not have your interests at heart. That we and the White Lodge can make use of that programming and have an interest in dancing with the devil. Again, that's a different level of this conversation. It's a different level of this topic. But never fall into the trap that mechanical nature itself is here for your benefit from its point of view. The monads, the souls, the spirits of nature, that's a different thing now. Because a cat can help you. But it's the monad of the cat that's helping you. And a dog can save your life. But it's the monad of the dog that's saving your life. Okay. Let's open it up to questions. 3 hours. Let's open it up to questions. Or any other comments. I was up this morning at 3 a.m. So I might be looking at another 17, 18-hour day. So this but we'll give you a couple minutes if you want to type away. I can give you guys an update on the in the meantime while you're typing, if you're typing a question or a comment. I can give you an update on Atlas Conscious Arts on the video. I'm going to have to put a disclaimer on the front of the video explaining that the amount of information that's contained in the period of time that it's presented will leave anybody who's still stuck in human 2.0 and just trying to understand it with their rational mind. It's going to make your mind spin. It's going to be potentially overwhelming. So it's like I have to put like a health warning on the beginning of this video. However, I'm going to include in this disclaimer. However, I am not here just to tell. I'm here to show. And in this video, in order for you to comprehend the value and the power of the human 3.0 paradigm, you have to be able to see and experience the sheer magnitude of knowledge, wisdom, and the ability, the power of self-evident experiential knowledge and the Aum of life. You have to be able to experience the power of what it is to operate from the human 3.0 paradigm, to have this upgrade. Because everything that you see in this 5-minute video, this 5-minute video encapsulates 10,000 years of the human condition, religion, philosophy, psychology, art, and science. And it is completely comprehensible in consciousness. But to the rational mind alone, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to make your head spin. Just so you know. Okay, but there is no way, there is no other way to communicate and show the value of the human 3.0 upgrade of conscious arts, and to show the power and value and the importance that it has to deliver to humanity. There's no way to do it justice with the human 2.0 paradigm. And it would be impossible to encapsulate the truth in a 5-minute video using that outdated, obsolete paradigm of rational dualism and binary thinking. This is the kind of like disclaimer that I need to put at the front of the video. And I don't care how pretentious it sounds. I don't care how elitist it sounds. I don't, because the facts are the facts. The truth is the truth. It is what it is. And it's shit or get off the pot time. And I don't need, 20 million people to watch the video and donate. If 25,000 people give $10 each, then we will be fully funded, and we're off to the races. Because I'm only trying to raise $250,000, and that's so I can hire full-time help, so we can get going. So, but the video is coming along, and like I say, there's a lot in there, and I just know what the feedback is going to be. People are going to say, there's too much. People aren't going to get it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, fine, that's good if they don't get it. That's good. Okay, some people are chiming in with questions. Tiffany says, tricky, finding that neutral space of finding wonder of creation and not getting ensnared by it. Thank you for the awareness of this. Okay, but here's the trick now. It's not tricky. It isn't. Remember your divine mother. Remember God. Remember the soul of the being. The wonder of creation is in the creator. Right? Why do we revere musicians? Why do we revere Renaissance artists? We revere their works, of course. But unless you're an art collector or a museum, right, hoarding and collecting their thing, we revere the artist, the creator, and the wonder and the inspiration behind the work, because we are touched and moved by the essence of and the spirit, the creative spirit that is coming through the creation. So this is the key. It's not tricky. What's tricky about it is that the sensory, hedonistic pleasure level, the pleasure centers, are trying to get you to become identified and attached and be filled with wonder at how it makes you feel hedonistically, or that gets you to attach to the feeling of it, whereas your consciousness feels the love of being touched by God. So so there's a discernment in there But it's, well, something now comes into my mind that I have to admit, it is tricky. Like, I take it for granted that I see God in, a puppy, right? Most people are just, oh, it's a puppy, right? Like, I know, like, I'm not attached to the puppy or anything. It's just the love. It's the pure love. But for many people, when they watch Star Wars, right? Like, I see scripture, right? I see high mythology. I see religion. I see God, right? I see Christ. Skywalkers are the Christ. This is what I see when I watch Gladiator. Like I said, Gladiator is scripture, but most people don't see that. They feel the wonder and excitement, but their mind associates the wonder and excitement to the visuals, to the storytelling, to the excitement, to the characters, to this, to that, the other thing, and they get distracted, and it becomes idolatry. They become identified and attached to the messenger, the characters, the idols of the mythology, instead of the essence of the truth that the idols are conveying as symbols and allegories. So it's tricky in a way, but if you remember God, if you feel into it with your consciousness, with your heart, and then you can get around the trickiness. You can break the spell, in other words. So when you are spellbound, okay, when you are hypnotized, when you are mesmerized, when you are engrossed, when you forget yourself, these are all clues to, your, and maybe every now and then it's good to, like, turn off the mind and just, have mindless escapism, and just, like, it's like sleep, because remaining conscious all the time is hard. It's hard. And I admit, like, a video game or whatever, like, when I was going through my last bout of depression, I was using a video game to try to keep me from binging on ice cream. It's a different kind of binging. I don't know if it was better, but it was certainly better than sitting there struggling and with depression and fighting the demon, and then going and running out and eating 4 quarts of ice cream over 3 days. So that's a slightly different issue, but it's related, right? It's related because we're asking the same question, right? We're just coming at it from different angles. But discernment is the key. Discernment is the key. And are you forgetting yourself in the process? Are you being engrossed, ensnared, spellbound? Open up a thesaurus on the computer and look up mesmerized, hypnotized, and look at all the other words associated with that. And then next time you are confronted with some advertising, look at all the words popping up in advertising that are associated with mesmerizing and hypnosis and mind control. Like, it's an interesting exercise to go and read up on mind control, and then go read up on branding and marketing, and you discover that the books, they're talking about different things, right? No, they're talking about the exact same thing, right? The overlap in the language and the techniques and everything is it's uncanny, right? And just realize that all that stuff, nobody does it better than mechanical nature. Nobody mesmerizes and hypnotizes and manipulates the mind better than mechanical nature. No one, nothing. Because the being, God, does not manipulate, mesmerize, and hypnotize the mind. God seeks for the mind to awaken. Benjamin says, You mentioned earlier that the Black Lodge isn't offering pleasure, but rather using it as bait to extract something from us. Much of what we have in the Western world, cell phones, video games, endless entertainment on TV, and the abundance of sugar in our food, seems designed to lower our consciousness and condition us for fleeting pleasures. It seems their ultimate goal may be to target the next generation, leading them towards degeneration. That's always the goal. It's the goal for every generation. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, you basically, you nailed it. You're getting the expression. Mugaboo22 says, I have a question. It's pure curiosity. So I found videos of people claiming vampires may actually exist. One thing for sure, from east to west, Africa to Lake Baikal in Russia, there are stories about mermaids. Some cultures view them as beings to stay away from but respect. Most view them as demonic. There are many stories about other beings that live here on Earth. Are these physical beings, in your opinion? Are these demons that are able sometimes to show themselves in the physical world? Vampires are real. Okay, they're not the vampires of Nosferatu and Anne Rice, Interview with a Vampire. It's nothing like that. There are energy vampires. You've known them, you've met them. There are beings who have entities within them. They're possessed by entities and they go through life feeding on other people's energies. And really, there are individuals who actually drink the blood, and there's child sacrifice, animal sacrifice. There are blood cults, and it's all energy because the prana is in the blood. And there's a kind of, it's like a rare form of hemophilia or something similar to that actually people they need blood transfusions to stay alive, but those aren't vampires necessarily because they go to like blood clinics and stuff. But there are others who drink blood, and so there are many versions of that. Now, you said mermaids. Mermaids, as half woman, half fish, I believe are most likely just an Atlantean reference to what we call centaurs. They might be real. They might exist deep in the ocean. We have explored very little of the ocean, but most likely they're fourth dimensional entities. They're like jinn that can materialize or appear to materialize. So like ghosts, like apparitions, like when people see homunculi, for example, right, which are the elemental spirits of the mineral kingdom. Those are gnomes. Those are pygmies, right? People can see them sometimes, and people who are clairvoyant. So some people can see them, some people can't. So a lot of these are interdimensional beings, fourth dimensional beings. I honestly don't know about physical mermaids. I can't speak to that, but vampires I can speak to. And oh yes, there's also beings living in the center of the planet. There's an entire world underground. There's much more happening on this planet that we are aware of. And there are also other dimensional levels happening in this planet. So when I went to visit, for example, the Library of Atlantis, the Lost Library of Atlantis, is in the mountains of Tibet, the Himalayas, and it's deep underground. But you can only access it through astral projection. So it's a misnomer to just connect everything and ask, does it physically exist? Because physical reality is an illusion. So the fourth dimension and fifth dimension are more real than the third dimension. So to say, are they real or not, you have to flip the question on its head. And because if they're in the fourth dimension or fifth dimension, then yeah, they're real. They're real phenomenon. The fact that you can't see them or very few people see them doesn't make them not real. It just means they have no reason to be in hell with us, right? In the wilderness, cast out of Eden. So the question about mermaids, I haven't done a lot of undersea deep sea exploring, and I haven't. It wasn't of particular importance for me to find out that, but I can tell you there are many different beings living and sharing this planet with us, above, underground, above ground, and in the other dimensions that most people don't know about, and certainly science knows nothing about and would never accept their existence because there's no empirical way to prove it. Godfather asks, do you believe there is a demiurge and a true creator? The answer is yes and yes. Oh yes, you said and. Yeah, so the demiurge is the spirit between man and nature, and the demiurge can be understood as the cosmo creator. So for example, there's Jehovah or Yahweh, who's the being at the center of the sun. The sun is his planet. The sun is his body. Now he's a cosmo creator, which means he's a Christified master. And he is expressing the Christic force, because the Christ is the great multiple, the perfect multiple unity. It is God in action, right? So the Trinity of God is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. At the top is art, right? The Father who is that which is like God is, right? So our Father who art in heaven, that's what the word art means, to be. Now on his right side is Thor, right? The Christ, the Son, right? Odin's son, all father, like Odin's son is Thor, and Thor yields the lightning. That's the Christ. That's the being of God in activity. That's the energy energized and arcing down through all of creation, through all the different hierarchies of creation. Like you look at arc lightning coming down from the heavens. That's Thor. Now, Art and Thor, you put them together, you get Arthur, King Arthur, who pulls the sword and the stone, and then it just rolls out from there. So there are levels and levels and levels and levels and levels. Asking me the question of, do you believe in the demiurge and a true creator, is like asking me, do you believe in the tree and the tips of the roots, or do you believe in the tree and the root system? And how does the tree create the branches and all the fruit if not for the root system? Is the root system separate from the tree? No. Is the demiurge separate from God? No. Is the demiurge separate from nature? Or is the root system separate from the root tips that are down in the dirt, that are down in the soil? The answer is no. It's all one thing, but it's a perfect multiple unity. So I would ask you this question, consider yourself. Look at your body, right? Are you one entity? Well, of course you are. But look at your body under a microscope. You are trillions and trillions and trillions of little entities. They're called cells. And not only that, a whole billions of them are organized into things called organs and organ systems. You have a central nervous system. You have the endocrine system. You have your skeletal structure. You have the largest organ in the body, which is your epidermal layer, right? Your skin. So the answer is yes, 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 yes. And are all these things you? The answer is yes. Temporarily, they're part of your mortal vessel. So if you, a physical being, can be structured that way, and a solar system can have at its center an expression of Christ, as a monad, there's a soul at the middle of the sun who's a Christified master who's expressing the Christ in this solar system. It's like the father for all the planets in the system. And each planet is like the mother of all the organisms living on it. That's where, but we mustn't confuse Melchizedek, which is the monad, the being, the cosmo creator at the center of the planet. We must not confuse that with Mother Gaia, right? Because that's worshiping mechanical Mother Nature. We must always keep our terms between worshiping divine Mother Nature and mechanical nature. And I don't want to, I covered that for 3 hours, so we're not going to get tangled up in that again. So yeah. So look at yourself. If that can be true, and are you the creator of your own fate? You have the free will to make your life what it is. And you have trillions of little beings supporting you in that endeavor. But it's your will, right? So your hand fulfills your will. But that's all these little... So if you meditate on this just a little bit, right, then you understand that there's a different level between the beings in your hand and you, the one who's willing it to do stuff, and then the being inside you, which is your true self, willing you to do things, and then the being of beings, which is the Christ, the perfect multiple unity, which is God in action, willing the universe to be. So there's levels and levels and levels and levels and levels. Benjamin says, I'd like to comment to Mugaboo's question. I believe vampires might be real in a metaphorical sense because there are people who are rumored to drink children's blood, treating it like a drug. Some even accuse the global elite of consuming adrenochrome. In the Bible, consuming blood was prohibited. In the Bible, consuming blood was prohibited because it was associated with the practice of wicked people in ancient times. There's the consuming of blood is problematic, and getting blood transfusions is problematic because you can actually transfer karma because of what's in the blood. You can transfer karma. So the drinking of blood, it's like there are many filthy addictions out there, like dirty. I mean, you know this, right? I don't have to get in. I don't. Let's not dig up old bones. But there are, in terms of depravity, there is no basement to depravity. Okay, there's no limit to the depths of depravity and the hells that people can get sucked down into. Like, you want to talk about a rabbit hole, the downward spiral. So, yeah, the adrenochrome thing I didn't mention, but that was part of what was in the essence of what I meant about people drinking blood for the energy. And then the adrenochrome thing, there's a drug-like addictive quality to it. But the child sacrifice and everything else, it's like, it's youthful energy, it's innocence. And the Black Lodge likes nothing more than to consume and corrupt innocence and feed on the energy of of corruption, right? But you're right about drinking the blood in the Bible and everything else. So there are vampires, but they're real energy vampires. So I wouldn't know if I would go so far as to call them metaphorical. They're metaphorical in the sense of, here's what you can do. You can say the vampires in movies and books are the allegorical, metaphorical, symbolic, hyperbolic expressions of a very real phenomenon that expresses itself in far more horrific and mundane ways. No, are there people who change into bats and sleep upside down and sleep in coffins? there are people who sleep in coffins. That's only because they are identified and attached and believe themselves to be vampires and act like that. So it's all a confused, muddled up mess, frankly. But there are real vampires. There are real parasites. Mugaboo says, thank you, Atlas. Godfather says, thanks for your answer. And Tiffany says, love and light always, brother. And she also gave me a thank you. So with that, we've had a good half an hour of questions. So I'm going to assume that if you wanted to ask something, you asked it. And that from this point forward, I'm going to, and Mugaboo says, yes, indeed, life is in the blood. Thanks. At this point, I'm going to wish everybody have a wonderful week. I look forward to seeing you next Sunday. And as always, until then, everyone take care and inferential peace.